This monk build can dish out well over 200 damage to single targets at level 12 and is borderline unhittable when using patient defense. So let's build it and look at some great equipment options for each act. So to build the tank monk character, we can go ahead and pick any race that we want. It's not race specific, but I'm going to select Dwergar because they get the ability, they get dark vision, which is nice. They get additional advantage on saving throws against being charmed and paralyzed, which is nice. But most importantly, they get to enlarge themselves for free and turn invisible for free, which means that when in doubt, you can just be even better with your class or race specific abilities. However, as a tank monk build, we're going to need to find proficiencies somewhere. We're not going to start with armor and fighting proficiencies as a monk, so we have to start somewhere else, and that's going to be fighter. Fighter's going to give us the fighting style, which we are going to be an armored character, so I'm going to pick defense. We are not going to be using any weapons, so archery, dueling, great weapon fighting, useless. We will be using a shield, so theoretically you could use protection, but I'd rather protect myself. And then as far as background goes, this is not going to be a face character. It's only 8 charisma. So go ahead and pick something that's useful for you. You can, of course, drop wisdom and con a little bit or drop strength and wisdom a little bit and make it a face character if you wanted to, but that's not the way that I'm going to use it. So something like Guild Artisan, which is going to give you insight and persuasion, is not going to be useful. I'm going to pick Soldier because it gives you athletics. You can also pick Entertainer, which gives you acrobatics. These are nice things that will help out, make sure you're not getting shoved around too much. And then as far as ability points go, we're going to try and max out that strength as well as having good con and wisdom for that good DC as a monk. Our strength's going to be 17 because we're going to take a half feat in Tavern Brawler to get it up to 18. I have dexterity at 10 just so that we don't lose space, lose initiative roll spots, because that'll be pretty tough to overcome. You don't want to go last. We don't have to go first. We don't want to go last. Good con, solid con because it's going to be more of a frontline character. And then, like I said, wisdom because we're going to be trying to knock people over. We want to make sure that DC is pretty high. Intelligence is going to be our dump stat, and charisma. Intelligence can be a little bit of a problem getting CC'd at times, but this is something that can be worked around with items. And charisma, as long as you're not a face character, basically doesn't matter. I think it's only used to save against banishment. I think there's probably one more. And then as far as skills go, I would definitely go ahead and give this to acrobatics since we're going to be in the front lines. Like I said, we don't want to be getting pushed around too much. And since we're not a face character, I would probably just toss it in survival or perception, just so that we're passing those passive checks. So let's move on to our actual character and we'll start leveling up in monk. At level 2, we're going to hop over to monk because we got everything that we want from the fighter class, which is our armor proficiency and fighting style. By hopping over to monk, we're going to pick up flurry of blows, and we would pick up unarmored defense, but we're not going to need that because we are going to be wearing armor. More importantly, we pick up deft strikes, which means our punches won't do no damage. They'll do 1d4, which is great because we get to punch twice as a bonus action with flurry of blows. Moving on in monk, we're going to stay in monk for 5 more levels. So at level 2 for monk, level 3 overall, we're going to pick up our monk specific actions here. We would get unarmored movement, but like I said, this is going to be a heavy armor build, so we don't need to worry about that. We get an extra key point. We get patient defense, which is fantastic as a monk action. I find that this is a little lackluster as a straight up monk because you don't have the high enough AC to really make it hugely matter, but this will be a fairly high AC character, or at times a very high AC character, so patient defense can be very useful. We'll also be able to dash for a key point and a bonus action or disengage for the same cost. Since I picked Dwergar, you also get enlarge as a racial feature, which is fantastic. Moving on in monk to level 3, we're going to have to pick our subclass. Now all the subclasses are pretty good. Larian did a fairly good job of making every class viable, but Way of the Open Hand is just over the top good compared to most other subclasses, especially within the monk class itself. You're going to get Flurry of Blows Topple, Flurry of Blows Stagger, and Push. I use Topple all the time because knocking people prone and getting advantage for your entire party is fantastic. You can push people off cliffs with Push, and I don't use Stagger very often because you can just knock them prone instead. At monk level 4, we are going to pick up our first feat, and this is an interesting level here because we are now level 5 total, which means we would normally have extra attack. So technically we are a little bit behind other melee combatants because we do not have an extra attack. But because we have these key points and Flurry of Blow, we should be able to keep up or even still exceed damage from other classes because we're able to take care of of enemies with our bonus action so efficiently. As a Duergar, we're going to get the ability to become invisible, which is fantastic. And then as far as our feat goes, we're going to pick the ultimate monk feat in this game, which is Tavern Brawler. When you make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon or throw something, your strength modifier is added twice to the damage and attack rolls, which is great because it means you're never going to miss or very infrequently going to miss because it's added to your attack rolls as well. It's not just damage. It also brings us up from a 17 to an 18 in strength, so we get a +1 bonus to everything strength-based. Now that we're level 5 and picked up Tavern Brawler, we can look at sort of the end of Act 1 builds. Now, this is sort of the build that I would go with, and then we have a lot of alternative options here on the right, and I'll go through all of them. So, first of all, we have the Haste Helm, which is one of my favorite items. It's in the Blighted Village. You can get it extremely early, and it just gives you momentum at the start of every battle. Tons of extra movement, and since we don't have the unarmed movement from being a monk, it's going to be useful. I just have a 17 AC heavy armor here. There's not a lot of great heavy armors in the early game, so this is nice. I have the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle. These add 1d4 to all of your unarmed attacks. This is available on the way to the Rosemary Monastery, and they also give you Scorching Ray, which is nice. If you can't close the gap, you can always Scorching Ray somebody. And then in the Underdark, you can get the Boots of Speed from, I believe, the Myconid Colony, but don't quote me on that one. This is going to give you a free bonus action dash, so we don't have to use our key points. Using a key point to dash is kind of wasteful when we can use the key point to punch. So this sort of gives us that free dash ability. Up until level 7, this build is going to make sense to have weapons. After that, it's going to make sense to be unarmed. With this weapon, we would do 6 to 11 standard damage and an additional 1d4 fire. Without it, we would do 5d10 of punching damage, although I don't know if that's calculating correctly. It's going to be pretty close at this level. You can kind of choose whichever you want, but I'll take the extra ability of the Gold Wormling Staff, which is giving us another little ranged attack and a little bit of extra fire damage. And then as far as shields go, in Grimforge, you can go ahead and pick up the Adamantium Shield, the Adamantine Shield, which is great. And if you steal the idol, you can get the Ring of Protection, which is another +1 to armor class. And then since we are only 10 decks, I would definitely go ahead with the Bow of Awareness. This gives us a +1 to initiative roll, and I believe is found right here in Emerald Grove. Now, as far as alternatives go, you can go ahead and just pick up any shield. Of course, if you want to give the Adamantine Shield to somebody else, you can go ahead and pick up any shield you want. As far as bows go, you can go ahead with the Jolt Shooter. Now, we're not going to be using our bow a lot, but if you do need to use the bow before you close the gap, this will give you lightning charges, which can then be added additional damage to all of your punches when you do reach the character that you're fighting, which is great. You can also go with the Hunting Shortbow. Since we are using a weapon, you get free Hunter's Mark, which is great, as well as advantage on monstrosity type characters. Or since we are such a high strength character, you can give them the Titan String Bow, which is from the Zemtarian. God, I hope I said that correctly. This is from the bandits camp way up north, and it adds your strength modifier to damage, so it actually makes you a viable bow user, although you won't hit particularly often. But since we're not going to be a ranged user, those don't really matter. As far as alternatives for headgear goes, if you want somebody else, maybe like a rogue, to have the Haste Helm, you can give this character the Warped Headband of Intellect. That's probably what I would do, because that means that you would be 16 Wisdom, 17 Intelligence, 18 Strength, 14 Con. So basically everything except Dex saves and Charisma saves would be pretty legit good at, which is nice. You don't want to get crowd controlled, so having 17 Intelligence and 16 Wisdom means you probably won't get crowd controlled too much, and then you're not going to get entangled or restrained because of that high strength. If you do have extra adamantine or mithril ore, you can go ahead and give this character the adamantine armor. Just going to give you an extra 1 AC compared to sort of the standard high tier armor, but it's also going to have some additional effects like not getting crit and sending characters reeling. And then there's a ton and absolutely ton of gloves. So really early on, if you follow Kaga's questline, you can go ahead and get the Sparkle Hands. This is, like I said, on Kaga's questline, if you go and find the little hidden note in the tree, these are going to give you lightning charges when you do unarmed attacks. It goes well with the Jolt Shooter, and then being able to do like that additional, whatever that burst damage is when you max out your lightning charges is pretty nice, a nice little buff. Even earlier than that is the Gloves of Power. This is going to essentially bane enemies that you hit with a weapon attack. This is nice since we will be a frontliner. This is when you meet Will. That's very early on. You could also go with the Gloves of Dexterity. You could even go unarmored if you did go with the Gloves of Dexterity. Let me just go ahead and take that off. You're still going to have reasonable AC if you went with no shield and no armor there. If you do have the gloves of dexterity, I'm not a huge gloves of dexterity fan, so I probably wouldn't use them, but it's definitely an option, especially fairly early on, although I think those are in the Kretch, the Githlang Yankee Kretch. In the Emerald Grove, you get the gloves of missile snaring. We're not going to have missile snaring as a monk for the first, I think that's level 3 for monk, so you're not going to have this right away, so this is a great way to kind of knock down that long range damage against you. And then the gloves of the Growling Underdog, when there's 2 enemies near you, you just get automatic advantage on melee attack rolls. This is a fantastic gloves, and I use them for a very long time in this game. As far as movement goes, the Spring Step Boots give you momentum whenever you dash, which pairs well with Step of the Wind dash. Boots of Genial Striding are just going to give us resistance to difficult terrain. The Boots of Stormy Clamor, when we inflict a condition on somebody, they get reverberation. So if we topple them, they also get reverberation, which is awesome. And reverberation is going to give them a penalty to their saving throws, which is fantastic. And then if you do get sort of the premier boots from Act 1, you can get the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, which just give you resistance to getting captured by anything, which is fantastic. As far as necklaces go, a free Misty Step never hurts. I personally would probably do the Sentient Amulet. This is in Grimforge and gives you key restoration, although you do have to pass a Wisdom saving throw if you want to use Shatter, but we have pretty high Wisdom, so that should be fine. And you can also get the Spectator's Eye in the Underdark, where Ray of Fear from a distance or Wounding Ray from a distance. We're not going to have a lot of good distance attacks from range because our dexterity is so low. So it's kind of nice to have sort of that Scorching Ray from the gloves, and also maybe you could add in a Ray of Fear or a Wounding Ray from this one. Not a bad option there. I also have the Ring of Color Spray. This is one of the first rings you get. I like it since you can blind somebody with your action, and then you have advantage on all of your flurry of blows, which is fantastic. Just to show off some of those abilities in action, as a Dwargar, we get the ability to enlarge ourselves, which is absolutely stupendous. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that right before we start this battle. And then we can go ahead and attack this poor bear here, as I have a ranged weapon equipped, which I did not mean to do, but it shouldn't matter anyway. We should be totally fine. Now, this is a situation where you might actually end up fighting these people. Because if you do end up picking sort of the more evil storyline and storming the Druid Grove, as you saw there, we get a free deflect missile and get to spend a key point to just send that right back at that guy. And since there's sort of so many people in this battle, I'm just going to show off our defensive capabilities first. I'm going to use Patient Defense, and we'll just watch everybody presumably miss us for the foreseeable future, and then we'll start a punching. Now, he misses, and he's sent reeling because we have that adamantine armor. They can't hit me with these arrows. I'm literally dishing arrows back to them, although that won't hit whatever that is. You do have to be careful of that. Unfortunately, the way that the game works is the arrow thrown back is extremely straight. We'll go ahead and take out that bear, and since we have the ability to topple, I'll go ahead and do this as well. That knocks out that character. That's 2 characters done. I could just go ahead and occupy this guy, and with my high... Although I guess he disengaged. But we can just keep chucking things back at this guy and he's down. So we didn't even get hit. I guess technically we took a little bit of fire damage. But we didn't really get hit. At level 5 for Monk, level 6 overall, we're going to pick up our own extra attack, which is great. We're also going to pick up Stunning Strike for both melee and unarmed attacks. This is a fantastic ability here. You can just completely crowd control one character. With 16 Wisdom, you should have a pretty difficult DC to save against this, and you can just completely crowd control enemies and still do damage with your bonus actions, or at the very least an unarmed attack for free as a bonus action, which is excellent. One of the best crowd control abilities in the game. And then at level 6, our last level for Monk, we're going to pick up all of the seminal abilities for Way of the Open Hand. We get Key Empowered Strikes, which means your unarmed attacks count as magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance and immunity, which is phenomenal. It just means that people aren't going to be able to resist your damage as well as they normally could. Improved unarmored movement's not going to affect us, and the key point is nice, but the key here is the subclass features. We have the ability to add 1d4 plus our wisdom modifier in necrotic damage, or psychic damage, or radiant damage. So that's 4 to 7 damage on every single punch we do, and flurry of blows is 2 punches per use. So that's 8 to 14 additional damage to your flurry of blows, which is phenomenal. We also get the great overpowered ability Wholeness of Body. You're going to heal yourself, you're going to get half your key points back, and you're going to get an extra bonus action, which means if each flurry of blow does 8 to 14 damage, now we're doing 16 to 28 damage if we have 2 bonus actions from our Wholeness of Body and are able to pull off 2 flurry of blows, which is amazing. But what would be more amazing than Wholeness of Body giving us a bonus action, extra bonus action sometimes, would be having an extra bonus action all the time. So we're going to hop over to Rogue, where we'll have the ability to pick up some more proficiencies because Rogues are great skill monkeys. Pick whatever you want here. Since this is not a face, I usually just pick things like Perception to make all those passive checks. At level 2 for Rogue, we're going to pick up the Rogue-specific Cunning Actions, which is actually very useful for this build. You're only going to have 7 key, and using key on dashing or disengaging stinks. It's not a very useful purpose for key, so being able to do it for just a bonus action at this point helps you really save those keys for your punches and for your patient defenses. And you can also hide. Granted, we're going to have disadvantage from wearing armor from hiding, but since there's just sight lines in battle, you can still hide and sneak up on people really well and get free advantage as long as you're not in their sight lines. Our last level of Rogue, we're going to pick up the subclass Thief, and that will give us the additional bonus action. We would also get resistance to falling damage, but we already have that as a monk. Most importantly, we get that extra bonus action, so now we have the ability to always Flurry of Blows twice if we want to, or what I would normally do is attack twice and then Flurry of Blows, and then unarmed attack with that second bonus action, and then you get 1 punch from the attack, 1 punch from your extra attack, 2 punches from your Flurry of Blows, and an additional punch from your unarmored attack. That's sort of the standard issue monk. You're getting 5 punches in for the cost of 1 key, which is just phenomenal. So now that we're at level 10, this is sort of your end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3 level. At least if you play the game like I do, if you sort of soak in as much experience as possible. So level 10 would be sort of your fighting Ketheric build, and that's what we're going to show off here. So as far as items go, I actually still have the Haste Helm. I don't think that in Act 3 there's 1,000 great helmets, but in Act 1 and 2 there's not. So the additional amazing movement I think is something that I'd like to stick with. Here from Quartermaster Tally, from the last light in, you can get an additional +1 to your saving throws and armor class as a cape, which is great. You'll notice that our AC is actually lower, and that's because I switched to the Radiant, the Luminous armor for Radiant Shockwave. We'll see how that gets into effect for a second, because we do get radiant damage from our punches. I left on the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle, as well as the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, because these boots rock. I have the Sentinel Shield, which this is from I think it's from Roa Moonglow, or the other person in the tower in Act 2. This is just an additional +3 bonus to initiative roll, which is fantastic. As a 10 dex character, this will be very nice for us. The Ring of Protection is basically always going to be good. You can also get Killer Sweetheart in Act 2, which is just an auto critical hit once per long rest, which is very nice if you want to walk into a boss battle or an important battle and just absolutely hammer people. I'm also going to go ahead and put on the Sentient Amulet here. That key restoration is awesome. Whenever you can basically dump all your key every single battle. If you have ways to get it back. With Wholeness of Body, you can get half of it back. With key restoration, you can get half of it back. And then with short rest, you're getting all of it back. So you're getting a lot of key, even though it's only 7. You're getting that refreshed a lot. And then also in this area, you can get the Darkfire Shortbow. You can haste yourself or others. You also get resistance to fire and cold. We're not going to be using bow. We're not going to be using our bow very often. We're going to be closing the gap and punching people, but getting those resistances and haste is fantastic. Alternatively, if you didn't want to use a Radiant build or a Radiant Shockwave build, you can just go ahead and toss on the heaviest armor you can find. That's going to go ahead and get you up to 24, 25-ish AC, depending on what armor you find, which is awesome. If you want to deal different types of damage, for example, you can go ahead and toss on these gloves and get radiant damage, and then you can go to your passives and change your actual damage style to something else, whether that's necrotic or psychic. So we'll go ahead and do that for the example. You can also go ahead and do force damage. These are all over the place. I'm not even 1,000% certain that these are Act 2. These radiant ones might be the beginning of Act 3, but you can still get radiant damage from your own manifestations, so they still apply. As far as shields go, after you defeat Ketheric, you can get his shield for an extra bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. I believe that that will impact your punches, but it is yet to be tested. Your flurry of blow topples and stuns, but it yet to be tested. You can also use adamantine shield if you want these shields to be on other people, or if you just want to avoid those critical hits. And then as far as alternatives for ring scale, I just have the Ring of Fire. If you want to leave the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle on, this basically just gives them a +1 to all of your punches, which is nice. Not a ton of new equipment in Act 2 for this build. There's a ton of monk equipment, but since we are not a dex-based monk, we can't actually use a lot of the clothing and stuff. So let's see how much damage we can do. First of all, we'll just take a quick little peek at what our one punch does. As one punch man, we do 14 to 25 damage as a single punch, and 28 to 50 damage as a single flurry of blow. And as a Dwergar, we can do things like enlarge ourselves or make ourselves invisible. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we can go ahead and just absolutely topple this guy. They're not going to be pleased about it, but we can do it. So we went ahead and we did, what's that, like 30 damage to this guy, just under 30 damage to this guy with one bonus action. And then they're going to go ahead and try and attack us. We still have deflect missile as a monk, and we can still chuck it back at people, which is great. We're actually going to hit this guy close to us, which is nice. He's probably a bigger threat anyway. And then since we have that resistance to fire from the Darkfire short bow, we're getting a lot of great resistances as well as our high AC. And then this guy, even though he hit us, he does have, or did have, Radiating Orb before it went away. Not 100% sure why it went away on the first turn. Doesn't seem super fair. Since we still have an extra bonus action, so we can go ahead and just finish this guy off if we want to, which I will. And then we can just go ahead and, if we wanted to, we could do something like Stunning Strike this Harper. Or all these guys have Radiating Orb. These two have 10 Radiating Orbs, and this guy's 6 on this person and 2 on this person. So they're all going to miss pretty consistently. I'll just go ahead, and this person's stunned, so their turn's going to skip. And then everybody's going to miss, and since we have extra attack, we can just go ahead and take that person out. Now at level 11, we reach a bit of a crossroads. You can hop back into any of the classes that we are already a part of. If you stay in Rogue, you're going to get a feat right away, where you're going to have the option to just bump up strength all the way if you need it. Or you can go ahead and pick up something like Alert, which is going to make sure that we're not going last. We do only have 10 dex, or any other feat that you're interested in. You can also hop back into Monk, where you're going to pick up Evasion, as well as Stillness of Mind, which will keep you from being charmed or frightened. And if you stay in Monk all the way out, you will still get a feat at level 8, just like you would if you stayed in Rogue. It'll just be a little bit later. You can also hop back into Fighter for the ever useful Action Surge if you want it. However, since this is sort of a maximum OP damage build, I'm going to hop into Druid, which is going to give us some options here for cantrips and spells. Now, cantrips aren't going to be super useful on this build, so go ahead and pick whatever you want. If you don't have a guidance user, it's pretty late in the game to not have it, but go ahead and toss guidance on there, and then I'll do resistance in case we get into any unexpected conversations where resistance can be helpful. And then you're going to get an option for some spells here. Now, these are just level 1 spells. Not the most useful, but something like Healing Word is always useful, and since we're not going to be using our spells for anything else, I think putting healing onto this character makes a lot of sense. You can also do something like Fog Cloud to make them more sneaky, and maybe Ice Knife if you want to do a little crowd controlling where you can put an ice patch somewhere. I think those are probably the most useful. We're not going to be doing spells a lot, but having Healing Word on a character is always amazing. And taking it all the way out to level 12, at Druid, we're going to pick up a subclass feature, which is nice. We're going to pick up the Circle of Spores. Now, we have the ability to Wild Shape, but it's not going to be super useful and probably not going to be something you're going to want to use a lot because it's only the first initial Wild Shape creatures at level 12, so they're not going to be super useful. But what we do pick up, which is great, is Symbiotic Entity. By using Symbiotic Entity, we gain 4 hit points per level in Druid, so that's going to be 8 temporary hit points, and deal an additional 1 to 6 damage in necrotic damage while you have that temporary hit points. Now this impacts every single time that we do damage to a character. So I mentioned before that if you attack an extra attack, you get 2 punches. If you flurry of blows, you get 2 more punches. And if you unarmed attack, you get another punch. So that's sort of 5 punches stock. So that's 5d6 of necrotic damage that can be added to this. And then, of course, if you're willing to flurry of blow 1,000 times, or if you do that wholeness of body, you can get that flurry of blow. You can do 3 flurry of blows, which is ridiculous. You're also going to be able to get an additional spell slot, but that's not really going to matter. I would just pick all utility things like this, and then we're done. So let's go into battle and we will see all of the damage that we can do, which is, at this point, is absolutely crazy. Now that we are level 12, we have access to all of the Act 3 items, which is great. It gives us even more power than we already had, as well as some more AC, which is great. If you want to still run that Radiating Orbs build that you saw in Act 2, you can. That's going to be a viable build all the way through, but I just have whatever heavy armor we can grab here. There's a ton of great armors in the late game. Grab whichever one you like. They're all good. But as far as things that actually synergize with this build, I think that it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and just buff those defenses with everything that's not gloves, and then with the gloves we can buff our offenses. So for the helmet, I have the Hell Dust helmet. That's just going to give us +2 to our saving throws, and we can't take crits, which is fantastic. We already have Dark Vision, so no problem there. There's not a lot of better cloaks than the Cloak of Protection. Alternatively, you can get the Cloak of Displacement, which is just going to give enemies disadvantage on attack rolls against you. It's up to you, 1 AC or disadvantage. This disadvantage is situational. It does go away after you get hit, so it's not always as useful as armor class, but it's up to you. Like I said, pick whatever armor you want. Any heavy armor is great. They're all great. There is only one option for punches, though, and that's the Gloves of Soul Catching. They give you 1d10 force damage to your punches, as well as hit points when you punch somebody, which is unbelievable, and it also buffs your constitution, which is just... They're overpowered. I'm surprised that Larian put gloves in this game that are so good. There's other gloves that give you 1d6 damage, but these ones, you can get them at the magical shop. I can't remember the name of it. Where the magical place where the mage tower guy, I sound ridiculous. You know what I'm talking about. You can get them there. You can buy them 1d10 force damage for every single punch. We're going to be punching minimum 4 times, or minimum 5 times per turn, so it's ridiculous. I leave the Disintegrating Nightwalkers on because I like to be able to have my crowd control character and web somebody or entangle somebody, and then I run right in and punch the crap out of them. As far as necklaces go, there's not a ton of amazing amulets for this character. You can, of course, stick with the Key Restoration, which is great. You could, of course, get the necklace that gives you maximum constitution from the Hell Avernus if you want, but as far as more realistic ones, because there's only one of those to go around, we can't be giving those to everybody. So more realistically, you can get the Surge of Subjugate Amulet every time you crit, or once per long rest. When you crit, you can paralyze a character. That just leans into this. We can already stun characters, now we can paralyze them, which is excellent. You can also give the Periaptive Wound Closure, which just gives you maximum HP restoration when you're healed, and when you're downed, you just automatically stabilize. And you could also get the Fey Semblance Amulet. You're going to get advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws. That just means that these 2 saves are going to become... Wisdom's going to become borderline automatic save, and Intelligence is going to become pretty darn good. Now, I still have the Darkfire Shortbow here. This is a great item all the way through to the end of the game. You can get the Legendary Bow, and it does essentially the same thing. It allows you to haste yourself, which is also equally well, but it seems like a bit of a waste on this character who won't use it. Alternatively, you could use the Dead Shot. This is going to increase your critical hit rate. Even though it is only a bow, it will still increase your critical hit rate overall, which is great. And then alternatively for headgear, like I said, if you don't have a lot of good headgear, if you're giving all this good headgear to other people, you can go ahead and just go with the Headband of Intellect. That's going to make sure that these, especially if it's paired with this, now you have advantage on Intelligence and Wisdom saving throws, and you have high Intelligence and Wisdom. It makes you basically an uncrowd controllable character, which is very nice. But then there's a lot of other good options as well. The Hood of the Weave is going to increase that DC. The Mask of Soul Perception is going to give you +2 to your attack rolls and initiative, which is great because we're only a 10 dex character, so we're going to need a little bit of an initiative buff. And since Tavern Brawler adds our strength bonus to our attack rolls, we get a +4 to our attack rolls, and then we get another +4 from Tavern Brawler, and then we would get another +2 from this mask, so we basically will never miss with punches. You can also do the Head of Uninhibited Kashigo. After dealing damage with an unarmed attack, you get a +1 bonus to your DC, which is great. And then, of course, sort of the legendary OP option is the Helm of Baldur, which is going to give you a +1 AC as well as some free healing, which is also nice. I'm going to stick with the Mask of Soul Perception because that just means we're basically going to have 95% hit chance no matter what. And I don't think I went over the shield, but this is Viconia's Walking Fortress. This is from the Dark Justicianer's quest line with Shadowheart. you can go ahead and kill the sort of leader character there, and you get this +3 shield. And you also get advantage against spells, on saves against spells, which is nice. Alternatively, Kethric's shield is still pretty good all the way through to here, and there's a lot of other good shields, but this is probably the best one. This is like a premier shield. As the legendary item, it's pretty fantastic at everything. So as a 25 AC character that is able to Flurry of Blows topple for 30 to 74 damage, we can do a lot. All right, and to show off this fully powered character, we're going to see if we can take out a Kabi very quickly. Let's find out. I am going to haste myself since we don't have Wholeness of Body. I was effing around with that earlier. And then I guess we'll try and topple him, although he floats. I don't actually know if he will be able to be toppled. Nice first hit there as we did like 60 damage. And then we're going to have 2 attacks. So I'll crit him. That's a nice crit. And then I'll see if I can stun him. I did stun him. And since we're hastened, we get another attack, and we get another attack, and then we get another Flurry of Blows, which might actually kill him. Almost. So we stunned him, and we left him with, how much damage did we do? We did 230 damage on a Kabi that turn. So you can see how, with this build, if you really want to just absolutely overload somebody with damage, you certainly can. And then in the meantime, when you're not dumping all your ki into one character, you can just go ahead. You're just a great frontliner. But when you really need to dump damage into a character, you can just do ridiculous stuff like this and just absolutely blast people. Although I probably shouldn't have done push there, because now I'm not going to reach this character. But that's, you can see that there, 230 damage in one move. So if you like this build, if you like the idea of instead of being a dexterous monk, we're just going to be a super heavy mega tank monk, then go ahead and toss a like on here. And if you like this video, if you like all of my other videos, please do feel free to subscribe. It is much appreciated whenever somebody does. I definitely take note. And if you want to comment any other build that you'd like to see, or any additions or alternatives to this build that you'd like to see, please do. And I'm usually pretty quick to answer. Otherwise, I am going to go move this build to my main character in my honor mode run and see if it can get through the game.